Today's episode of the GoldCast is sponsored by Part 1 of the 49ers 2010s All-Decade Team. Now, the NFL just released their 2010s All-Decade Team, and we decided that it was time to do the 49ers All-Decade Team. We wanted to present to you the players, the nominees, and then the final players that we believe deserve to be on this list for the All-Decade Team. Now, we did this very specifically. So tonight will be special teams and defense. That's what we're going to focus on here, special teams and defense. For special teams, we're doing the punter and the kicker, and then the defense, we'll talk about all that when we get into the episode. But we're going to discuss who the nominees are, why we chose them, and then we're going to go and pick in real time who makes the final cut for the 49ers All-Decade Team for special teams and defense. That's part 1. Now, part 2 we'll be releasing next week on Wednesday or Thursday, somewhere right in there, just like we normally do. Probably Wednesday late night. It'll be in your inbox Thursday early morning. And that we will be releasing, we'll be going over our 49ers All-Decade Team for offense. So tonight is part 1, defense and special teams. Now, before we do that, though, Raymond, why don't you let them know where can they find us?
You can always like us on Facebook.com/TheGoldCast, and you can follow us on Twitter at @the_Goldcast, and be sure to subscribe to us via Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Stitcher, all under the same moniker of The Goldcast. Be sure to like and comment because we certainly want to hear from you, especially considering the fact that not every player that you may have been fond of the 49ers in the past decade made the final nominees list. So if you have a different take on who the 49ers All-Decade defense should be, we certainly want to hear from you in the comments section below.
Boom. There it is. Now, Raymond, if they want to speak to you directly, where do they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter at Ray Solis. That's Ray, SOLIS. And on Instagram at Ray Solis1. That's the number 1, not the spelling version of it.
Boom. Now, Raymond, you can, I'll say, where can they find me? You don't need to tell them. I'll tell them. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at I am Rudy 3rd. I am Rudy 3RD. All right, here we go, baby. Part 1 of the 2010s 49ers All-Decade Team. This is going to be so dope. We're very excited. Your professor of fanalism, I just walked in the building. The greatest fanalist in the game. He's here too. Class is in session. Let's go.
San Francisco, are you ready?
This is the GoldCast.
Boom! Welcome to another edition of the GoldCast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis I, baby.
Boom! Raymond, here we go. We are about to begin part 1 of our 2010s 49ers All-Decade Team. And we're going to start off with, as we mentioned in the intro, our special teams. And our special teams, for our special teams, we took 2 positions, punter and kicker. So that's where we're going to start, Raymond. And before we get into it, I just want to ask you just your overall process behind this, because you were the main man behind this.
Well, I was looking for productivity. So, because to be honest, the 2014 through 2017 were all really dismal years. I mean, Kyle Shanahan did win 6 games in 2017 initially when you got Jimmy G, but the team was struggling mightily before Jimmy showed up. And so when you have records that are that bad, it's hard to find players that are very productive, and by productive, I mean you're either knocking on the door of a Pro Bowl or, best case scenario, you are a Pro Bowler. And really those years are, the Pro Bowl years are 4 out of the last decade, to be honest. I mean, 4 years out of the decades, 3 of those, owned under the Jim Harbaugh era, where you had multiple players making Pro Bowls. I mean, 2018, I think the Niners had like 1 or 2 players make the Pro Bowls, and they're on the list, naturally. But so to me, it was productive play, were you near or close to Pro Bowl caliber play, then you should make the list. Did you contribute to a successful season, which there's a lot of names in the Harbaugh era that obviously did, and a lot of names in the 2019 era that did as well. But at the same time, it's like also, were you healthy? Did you start most of the season? For example, Pierre Garçon's been a really productive player throughout most of his career, and he was terrific with Peyton Manning, but he was horrible when he came with us. He did not, even though he was familiar with the Kyle Shanahan system when they were together in Washington, he could not stay healthy to produce the way that he had produced for Kyle back in Washington, and he wasn't very good. So even though he was a standout wide receiver overall, he was not a standout wide receiver in the time that he played with us. Therefore, couldn't make the list. And then there's other players, like there's lots of backups on these teams, and even when they were good, there's tons of backups. We can't include all those backups. I mean, that would be like we'd have like a 2-3 hour show going through all of those positions. And there's some notable backups that were great, great rotation players, great backup players, but in the end, we really had to kind of narrow it down to, some positions. Fullback, there was really only 2 players. I mean, you could argue, there's really only 2 fullbacks that played for these teams in 10 years, because fullbacks just, is a dying breed. There's only a couple players. There's only like so many fullbacks in the NFL right now. Some teams don't even have a fullback on their roster. So some positions you're going to see are going to be, pretty straightforward and self-explanatory, whereas other positions are a bit more robust and require a little bit more discussion in order to figure out, who makes the team and who doesn't. So, but either way, this was pretty fun. But that's kind of how I looked at the players by position and figuring out, who the nominees should be. And then from there, we're going to figure out who makes the decade team.
Yes, who makes the final starting rosters? As Raymond has already mentioned, we had no backups. These are only the starting positions. And so, Raymond, let's begin. And we're going to start with special teams, and we're starting with the punter. So let the people.
The most exciting position in football. The best first. Come out the gate with a swinging.
Come out the gate swinging. Exactly. So we only have one, so there will be no debate. Why don't you let the people know who is our punter for the 49ers 2010s all-decade team?
It's really a no-brainer for this position, obviously. I think it's Andy Lee. He was drafted by the Niners in 2004. He was a 6th-round pick, which is typically where you would want to get a kicker. He played for the team for 10 years, including 4 out of the last decade. And he was a 3-time Pro Bowler with us. Once earlier in his career, like in 2006 or something like that, and then he was a Pro Bowler twice during the Jim Harbaugh era. Which is pretty impressive considering that, the Jim Harbaugh team was a playoff contender team. Typically teams that are in the tournament that are like a 1 or a 2 seed, a lot of times their punters don't go to the Pro Bowl because you're not punting a lot. But I do know that Jim Harbaugh, that we didn't get into the end zone a lot, so we kicked a lot of field goals. But at the same time, Andy Lee making the Pro Bowl on a NFC championship contending team, that's a pretty big deal. I think that speaks very well of Andy Lee. And after that, we drafted Bradley Pinion, who's no longer on the team. I think he plays for Tampa Bay now. And then after that, we drafted Mitch Wishnowsky, the Australian kicker, who punts for us today.
Yeah, so Andy Lee, congratulations. You are on the 49ers all-decade team for the GoldCast. Okay, so now coming up is our first real debate, and this is for the spot of kicker. So, for the kickers, the nominees are David Akers played for the 49ers, drafted in 97, but played for the Niners from 2011 to 2012. Phil Dawson, undrafted in 98, played for the 49ers from 2013 to 2016. And Robbie Gould, who I constantly pronounce as Gould, as like Gould and goblins. I don't know why. But he was undrafted in 2005, and he's playing for the 49ers currently and has been here on the team since 2017. These are our nominees, Raymond, and I want to go through some of these highlights, and then I want to ask what you think of all three. Okay, so I'm going to shoot these at you, and you tell me where you feel. First, let's start with the oldest player on this list, and by oldest I mean the player who played the longest ago for us, and that would be David Akers. David Akers was on the team for 2 years, from 2011 to 2012, but his highlights are effing insane. The year he had in 2011 might be one of the greatest years a kicker's ever had, and he even has a stat that knocked off Jerry Rice in this year. This is bananas.
It's just really difficult to do, and even more impressive considering that the only player who was able to do it was a freaking kicker.
Raymond, he went to the Pro Bowl in 2011 with the 49ers. He was a two-time first-team All-Pro, 2011 again with the 49ers. He was PFW's Golden Toe Award in 2011, 49ers. Longest field goal in NFL history.
What was that? That award?
Golden Toe. Toe.
Is that like an official award?
Well,
I've never heard that award.
It's the Golden Toe.
It was on his resume.
It was on his resume.
Wow, I've never heard of that statistic.
Hey, it's a great one though. I love it. Who doesn't want the Golden Toe Award?
Yeah,
very fitting.
It's not the golden foot; it's the golden toe. That's funny.
This is a wonderful. I love this stat. I love the gold. I want to one day have the Golden Toe Award. So,
which toe?
Probably my left big toe, and I'll tell you why. Because when I was a professional breakdancer, I would always swing my right leg towards my left to begin doing Thomas flares, and all my movement would go that way. My right leg always swung, and my left leg was the balance foot. And so the balance was really predicated upon that left big toe. So my left big toe, in Rudy's world, when I give myself the award, I give it to the left big toe. Excellent question. So going back to this, he had the longest field goal in NFL history at 63 yards. At the time, it has since been broken. He has the most points scored in a 49ers season, 140.
Wait, who broke the record?
Oh, someone from the Broncos at 64 yards.
Just by 1 yard. Okay.
Yes, by 1 yard. The most points scored in a 49ers season at 143 points, beating the previously held record by Jerry the Goat Rice at 138 points. He beat it in the same game that he got the NFL record for 63 yards. He has the most field goals in a season with 44, and he's even thrown for a touchdown on a fake field goal. That was his year with us. Now, next we have Phil Dawson. He went undrafted in 1998. He played with the 49ers from 2013 to 2016. No real major stats of the season. Very consistent. Good player, as you've talked about in the past. Not a lot of strength, but highly accurate. If we talked about career stats with this guy, 441 field goals made, 526 attempts. Overall percentage of rate is 83%. His longest was 57. Now, next we have the unwashable Robbie Gould, who had a bit of a rough start at the beginning of the season, and we talked about that in last week's episode, or this week's episode on Monday, our 49ers Gold Dive. If you're not listening to that, you definitely should check that out. It is a gold dive into the entire 49ers season, the 2019 season that just passed, and we are doing a deep dive into every game. And at the beginning of this week on Monday, the previous episode on this channel, we did weeks 1 through 8. So if you haven't checked that out, this is a shameless plug. Go check it out. What are you doing? Stop this, go check it out, and come back. All right, back to this. So Robbie Gould's been with the team since 2017. His field goal percentage is 86.8%. His longest of all time is 58. And his total field goal attempts is 439 and made is 381. Raymond, now I want you to talk about these three guys. Which of these three becomes the kicker for the all-decade team?
This is actually kind of tough because when you throw out the stats that Akers had in 2011, it's like undeniably historically impressive. The single greatest, season a kicker has had. I'm not sure if a kicker's had a better season than David Akers in 2011. I really don't.
I really don't either.
At the same time, even though, he's played a lot longer than Phil Dawson. He played one more year longer than Phil Dawson, and Robbie Gould, came into the league like 7 years later, something like that. But Robbie Gould's way more consistent than these other guys. And here's the other thing too. Robbie Gould, in my opinion, Robbie Gould has made the same amount, almost the same exact amount of field goal attempts. Well, not almost, but he's made 5 less field goals than David Akers, but he's 6% better.
Okay, that's a great one. Can I counter you?
Sure.
But what if we could have that one monster year of David Akers every year?
If wait, is he even capable of having that every year?
I don't think so. every year he beats Jerry Rice's record again.
Oh my God.
Let's talk about this because, okay, yes, I'm with you on this. I get that his percentage is better. In fact, he's made. If you look at David Akers, what he has had 477 field goal attempts and has made 386, and Robbie Gould 439 and has made 381. Almost the same, but a lot less attempts. And you said 6% higher. But that Akers year is so monstrous. Do we want? So here's what I'm asking you, Raymond, and then we should move on. Do we want sweet, short, and sexy, or do we want long, old, faithful?
I think you just answered your own question by throwing the word faithful in there.
Oh, he got me. I can't even argue you. I didn't even mean it the way you meant it. All right. I will let this one go.
The plus Robbie Gould, his last name is also, it's a little bit of, there's a little bit of 49er in there. It's not spelled like gold, but it's pronounced like the metal gold. And
yeah.
And you just said that he's faithful. His kicking consistency is faithful, And there's only one team in the NFL that's fucking faithful.
All right. Congratulations, Robbie Gould. You are our kicker for the 49ers all-decade team. Okay, moving on. All right, here's a big one. Defensive line. Raymond, we chose the 4-3 in deciding our defensive line. We didn't go by position. We went by formation on these next two. So explain to the people, the GoldCast Nation, why did we go with the 4-3? Why did we choose this as our scheme when picking our nominees and picking who we're going to end up picking, like how many people we were going to pick for defensive line and linebacker on the all-decade team?
Well, we had to settle on a formation because every team plays a specific formation. So it's like, all right, do we do a 3-4 or do we do a 4-3? Which formation has the Niners played in more so than others? Historically speaking, I believe, they've played in the 4-3 more often. They did play the 3-4 in the Harbaugh era, but they play the 4-3 now. They play the 4-3 wide 9 technique. And in the Steve Young era, they played the 4-3. And the Joe Montana era, I'm not sure what they played. I think they played the 4-3 in the Joe Montana era too. But that because it was kind of that was the only way I could rationalize like which formation do we choose. It's like, all right, well, which one have they played in the most? As far as my recollection is concerned, they've been in the 4-3. So I mean, even after Steve Young, they played the 4-3 with the Jeff Garcia era. And yeah, well, really, I think they played 3-4 in 2005 for 1 year. That was the Mike Nolan era, but the very next season in Mike Nolan's coaching era, he went to 4-3 after that. So, and then after that, Mike Nolan went to 3-4 in 2007. So he was kind of weird. His whole system was weird, but anyways, yeah. But we went to 4-3 because the times they've been most successful has been in a 4-3 defense. So decided to kind of go with the bread and butter that they've been most familiar with in terms of success.
Okay, excellent. I love this. All right, so let's begin. The nominees for defensive line are Justin Smith at defensive tackle, the Cowboy. DeForest Buckner, gladly missed, R.I.P., rest in power. Ronald Blair, defensive tackle. Eric Armstead, defensive tackle. And slipping in at the final spot, Mr. Nick Bosa. Bum, 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 bum. So, Raymond, we have here and Ronald Blair. I'm sorry, I completely skipped. Ronald Blair! Sorry, Ronald Blair, I completely skipped you. We have 5 players, but only 4 positions. So, Raymond, let's talk a little bit about some of the highlights of these guys. Let's start with Justin Smith. He's with the 49ers from 2009 to 2014. His highlights include 5-time Pro Bowler, first team All-Pro 2011 and 2012, second team All-Pro 2012, 2013. He was the Pro Football Focus Defensive Player of the Year, Sports Illustrated Defensive Player of the Year. Stats, 880 tackles, 87 sacks, 17 forced fumbles, 3 interceptions, and don't forget that bull rush sack of Drew Brees in 2011. Then we got our boy who we just traded, Mr. DeForest Buckner. Drafted by the 49ers in 2016, he has spent his first 3 years only with this team. Pro Bowl, and he made the Pro Bowl in 2018. 263 tackles, 28 sacks, forced fumbles, 3, fumble recovery, 6, pass deflections, 11, defensive touchdowns, 1. Then we have our boy, Ronald Blair, currently on the roster as well. Okay, drafted by the 49ers in 2016. 86 tackles, 13.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. Then Mr. Big Contract Armstead, Eric Armstead, drafted by the 49ers in 2015, 152 tackles, 19 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 3 pass deflections. And then our young buck, the rookie, maybe a little recency bias, maybe not. But has he done enough, Raymond, in 1 year to earn the final spot on the defensive lineman 49ers All-Decade team? Mr. Nick Bosa. Drafted this year in 2019. Highlights include making the Pro Bowl in 2019, the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year, the Pro Football Focus Defensive Rookie of the Year, Pro Football Weekly Rookie of the Year, All Rookie of the Year, All Rookie Team. He even won the Pepsi NFL Rookie of the Year. I didn't even know Pepsi gave out the Rookie of the Year award, but at Pepsi, he won the Pepsi one. 47 tackles, 9 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 interception. Raymond, go down this list. Who makes the list? Who makes the cut? I would say, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say for me, I'm going to throw this out and I want to hear your your opinions. I think Justin Smith, DeForest Buckner are a lock for the All-Decade team. The real question for me is who gets cut between Ronald Blair, Eric Armstead, and Nick Bosa. Now, Raymond, what about you? Who are your locks? And do you agree with me? Are Justin Smith and DeForest Buckner's the locks?
I think Justin Smith absolutely is a lock.
100%.
DeForest Buckner, I mean, he's been more consistent than Eric Armstead, but I would not argue with an Eric Armstead pick, especially after the season he just had. By the way, I was wrong about Niners being in 4-3. They were actually in the 34 throughout the entire Joe Montana era.
So how do you feel between Buckner and Armstead? Here's my debate. I think Buckner is a lock because he started every single game. He was destruction when the team was good. He was destruction when the team was bad. I think he's one of the outside of Justin Smith. I think he's the best tackle we've drafted. I like Eric Armstead. He's had one monster year.
Right. Well, we didn't draft Justin Smith, but
no, we didn't. No, you're
but,
right.
I mean, we recruited him via free agency, and it was he didn't start having. I mean, he still played terrific in Cincinnati, just not Pro Bowl caliber, at least according to the votes. But I mean, he put up similar numbers in San Francisco he did in Cincinnati, but I think it was the way he put up the numbers that garnered so much attention and ended up, earning 5 straight Pro Bowl appearances. But I think Justin Smith is amazing. I think you got to have him in there.
No, there's no question. He's a lock. He was undoubtedly a lock. Now, what do you think about my pitch that Buckner should be a lock as well? 263 tackles and 28 sacks in 3 years? It's only been 3 years. I'm not even 28 years old. I don't know what that has to do with sack.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's just a part of me, part of my analytical brain leans towards the versatility of Eric Armstead, which was far better than what Buckner has displayed this time. But at the same time, I don't really think I can argue with the fact that what you said, which is Buckner's consistency and durability. Eric Armstead's been injury prone up until this year.
Well, let's put it this way, Ray. Let's go through this. Okay, go ahead. Finish your thought, and then I'll pop back in.
I just think, I don't know. Again, you can't go wrong with either pick, but if you're going with an all-decade team, I think durability and consistency is a must in the NFL, and DeForest Buckner has a decisive edge there.
Let's say this, Eric Armstead has played longer. He has 152 tackles, 19 sacks. Buckner has played on a much shorter amount of time, 263 tackles, 28 sacks in less years.
Yeah. He's been
in
way
one
more
less
productive.
year. Way more productive, and he's had one less year.
And he's healthy.
Oh,
That's
and is healthy.
That's what happens when you're healthy.
Every game he's played. He's played every game while the entire team was dying. Literally.
Yeah. Well, everyone was going to the hospital for not coronavirus.
Yeah. Raymond, if you looked on the starting roster, it was just emojis of skulls and crossbones. That's all they had for a couple years there. Nothing but skull and crossbone emojis as our starting lineup. And there is Old Faithful. Ye Old Faithful. Oh, now I threw it out again on purpose. Okay, so Buckner's a lock. Justin Smith's a lock. Now we've got 3 more guys and only 2 more positions. Mr. Ronald Blair, Mr. Eric Armstead, and Mr. Nick Bosa. Who do you got, baby boy? Who do you drop? I already think I know who I drop, and I know who I keep.
I think you drop Ronald Blair.
I think you're right. I think we drop Ronald Blair. Ronald Blair, honorable mention, wonderful job. Maybe in the next 10 years, but I think you keep Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead, and our defensive linemen are winners.
So you get the Twin Towers. So then you get the Twin Towers anyways.
You do.
That's great.
You get Justin Smith, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, and Nick Bosa as your 2010 49ers all-decade team. Could you imagine if we really had that? My God. It'd been a
crazy lineup.
That is insane. Wonderful, wonderful job. All right, moving on to our linebackers. The nominees for the linebacker position. We will only be taking 3 of these guys. Here we go. The nominees are Ahmad Brooks, Navarro Bowman, Patrick Willis, Alden Smith, and Fred Warner. These are your nominees. Now, Raymond, I will go through the highlights and we will begin the discussion. Ahmad Brooks was on the team from 2008 to 2016, 8 years. He made the Pro Bowl in 2013. He was a two-time second-team All-Pro in 2012 and 2013. 389 tackles, 55 sacks, 32 pass deflections, 3 interceptions, 12 forced fumbles, 1 defensive touchdown. Those are obviously his career stats, not necessarily just his 49er stats. Navarro Bowman, drafted in 2010, homegrown baby right here, the good old U.S. of 49ers. Played for the team from 2010 to 2017. 3-time Pro Bowler, 2012, 2013, 2015. 798 sacks. 798 sacks. That'd be the greatest.
the greatest pass rusher in NFL history.
NFL history. He's every amazing defensive player you've ever seen combined. Single-handedly won whole Super Bowls for teams. Career stats include 798 tackles, 14 sacks, 9 forced fumbles, 6 fumble recoveries, 5 interceptions, 1 defensive touchdown. Then, the unconquerable, the man, the guy who's literally was up for the Hall of Fame, may just get there, Mr. Patrick Willis. Drafted by the 49ers in 2007, he played till 2014. His highlights include 7 times to the Pro Bowl, 5-time first-team All-Pro. He was there in 2012 and 2011, 10, 11, and 12. Very important. That's part of the stat. Okay. He was already included in the NFL 2010's All-Decade team. Career stats, 950 tackles, 20 sacks, 8 interceptions, 16 forced fumbles, 2 touchdowns. Now next, the very controversial, heartbreaking career player, Aldon Smith. Drafted by the team in 2011, he played from 2011 to 2014. His highlights include the Pro Bowl in 2012, first-team All-Pro in 2012. His career stats: 141 tackles, 47 sacks, 1 interception, 6 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, 3 pass deflections. Last but certainly not least on this list, man, what a monster's row of linebackers. Mr. Fred Warner, drafted by the 49ers in 2018. Stats include 239 tackles, 3 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, 1 interception, 15 pass deflections, all for the 49ers. Couple guys who all these numbers are for the 49ers and for this decade. Fred Warner, Aldon Smith, Navarro Bowman. Navarro Bowman, he spent the last several years with the Raiders, so not exactly, but most of his stats are there with this team.
Yeah, I mean, he's retired now, but he went all
and
4
retired a Niner.
All 4 of his Pro Bowls were with the Niners.
Yep. So, Raymond, where do you stand on these guys? Let's go down the list. Let's start first with who are your locks? Because I think there's 2 locks on this list, but I want to hear who you think the 2 locks are. I think there's 2. Who are your locks?
I think Patrick Willis is an obvious lock.
100%.
He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, or potentially.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, he's going to get in my opinion, if he doesn't his highway robbery. 7 straight Pro Bowls from every year he played, except for 1.
So he's a lock. Do you have any other locks?
I mean, the tandem of Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman was the best in the NFL at the time that they were playing together. I'm leaning towards that. And, and we all know that Aldon Smith's athletic, he was an athletic phenom, much like Nick Bosa. And a lot of that talent fed off of the gel between him and Justin Smith. So it almost seems like, keeping that together would be a very prudent decision.
I understand what you're saying. So let me start by saying I agree that Patrick Willis is a lock. I think Navarro Bowman is a lock. Let's not forget 2 highlights. That 2 highlights alone, outside of these stats, put Navarro Bowman on this list. Number 1, he held that ball as the Seattle Seahawks ripped his ACL out of his body. He held that ball. Remember that? He held it. He recovered it, and horrible play, but he held that damn ball. And secondly, let's not forget pick at the stick. My number 4, if you haven't gone back, there's so many episodes that I'm promoting today. If you haven't gone back and heard our top 11 tournament, me, Raymond, and our esteemed co-host, Candlestick Will, who unfortunately cannot be on this episode tonight, we picked on the episodes the greatest Bay Area games of the decade, greatest 49er games of the decade on 2 different episodes. Pick of the Stick was my number 4 on greatest games of the decade. And he is the architect of the pick at the stick, the recoverer of that interception. He got the interception. Pick at the stick, let's not forget. So I think Navarro Bowman is a lock. Now the question is, who goes between Ahmad Brooks, Fred Warner, and Aldon Smith? Let me get back to Aldon Smith for you, Ray. My issue with Aldon Smith is all the off-the-field issues, man. I have a really hard time with that. It's really tough for me. It does not embody the 49er way. It's not just about the stats for these guys, ladies and gentlemen. It is also about, there's the intangibles too. We didn't really talk about that, but these intangibles are important. How these players, how they were perceived, all that matters. How their careers went when they were in San Francisco. This stuff plays into it, Raymond. His stats are undeniable. But what do you feel about the off-the-field issues? Does that weigh in, and does it weigh enough heavily for you to knock Aldon Smith off of this list for us?
Not for me, because we're just talking about talent. We're just talking about an all-decade team. What talent would you want if you had to build a team? What group of players do you think embodied, the greatest talent within a 10-year span?
Because if we're going greatest talent, there's no question you have to go Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, and Aldon Smith. Now, what are your feelings?
And Fred Warner, technically Fred Warner is an inside linebacker. So if we're playing a 30 or a 43 defense, we can only take 3 linebackers. We're going to take 3 middle linebackers. I mean, probably getting a little too in the weeds here, but I think, to me, I think Aldon Smith is the most complimentary piece left out of this group, although Ahmad Brooks was an excellent outside linebacker edge rusher to himself as well.
Make the pitch for Ahmad Brooks.
Well, Ahmad Brooks is super ever since. So again, this is another Cincinnati draftee, drafted by Cincinnati. He only played 2 years there. Then he came to us in 2009. But between 2009 and 2016, when he played to us, there was only one season he got 5 sacks. Every other season, he got 6 or more sacks. He was just super consistent. Ahmad Brooks is incredibly consistent. And in the Jim Harbaugh era, when they switched to a 34 defense, he had 7 sacks, 6 sacks, 8 sacks. He also had double-digit TFLs in all 3 seasons. He had 12, 12, and 12, which is insane. That's near, you're starting to get into Nick Bosa territory, who had 16 in his rookie season, 1 for every game. So Ahmad Brooks was definitely a amazing edge rushing pass rusher. Just didn't have the same crazy, it wasn't the phenom that Aldon Smith was coming out of the gate in his rookie season.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Man, I just have a hard time. With the off the field stuff. If we're going pure talent, I agree.
And his off the field stuff didn't really start until 2014, 2015.
Once his stats really started to drop.
I think a little bit in 2013, because his rookie year he had 14 sacks and didn't make the Pro Bowl for whatever reason. He had 14 sacks, 13 TFLs in his rookie season. The very next year, he had 19.5 sacks and 18 TFLs. That means tackle for loss, for those of you who aren't keeping up. And he had 27 quarterback hits in his rookie year, 29 in the following
All those stats are bigger than Bosa's.
Yeah.
Better than Bosa.
He was insane.
Damn it. All right, fine. I'll give in. Okay. All right, Raymond convinced me. I will go with this. Our linebackers, the 3 winners that are going to the 2010 49ers All-Decade Team are Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, and Aldon Smith. Congratulations, gentlemen. Honorable mentions, of course, Fred Warner and Ahmad Brooks. Okay, Raymond, cornerbacks. We are only taking 2. The nominees for cornerbacks are Carlos Rogers, Terrell Brown, Richard Sherman. Now, Raymond, let's start with some highlights. Mr. Carlos Rogers, drafted by Washington in 2005, he played for the 49ers from 2011 to 2013. He made his highlights include the Pro Bowl in 2011, second-team All-Pro in 2011. His stats are huge. Obviously, we have to take this with a grain of salt. He played a lot of different teams. He played with a lot of different teams here. 481 tackles, 1 sack, 5 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries, 17 interceptions, 3 defensive tackles. That's his career stats. Terrell Brown, drafted by the 49ers in 2007. He played from 2007 to 2013. God, it was such a drop-off after 2013. 310 tackles, 11 interceptions, 1 defensive touchdown, 59 pass deflections. And then the unconquerable Mr. Richard Sherman, drafted by Seattle Seahawks in 2011. He was with the 49ers from 2018 to now. The very controversial move of coming and joining us. 5-time Pro Bowler, 1 time with the 49ers in 2019. Second team All-Pro 2019. Also made the NFL's 2010s All-Decade Team. Raymond, who is a lock at cornerback for you?
Richard Sherman.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not just about – it's about the fact that he's been the absolute leader for this team. He embodies what Faithful is all about. Despite his short appearance on this, I think his overall success this decade and what he has done to that secondary in just 2 short years. I mean, the only other guy that I had this much of an impact with us in such a short time was Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
So now, Raymond, between Carlos Rogers and Terrell Brown, let's start with Carlos Rogers. Why did he make this list for you, and then why did Terrell Brown make the list?
Well, Carlos Rogers and Terrell Brown were both the starting cornerbacks in the Jim Harbaugh era when the team was its most successful, going to 3 straight NFC championship games. So it was really difficult not to do that because you got to remember 2014 to 2017, we didn't really have anybody. It's not like you didn't have anybody. You had Parrish Cox and Tremaine Brock, who had some productive years, but had productive years, in mostly losing efforts, losing seasons. And so it's kind of hard to all right, well, is that more indicative of just, decent play, during a down season, or are these guys talented? Because these guys really didn't do much. Brock and Cox, they didn't really do much outside of the Niners when they left the Niners. So I kind of was like, all right, well, then they were more, their success was more predicated on the system they were a part of versus them just, because if they had kept up that same consistency with other teams, I probably would have looked at them a little bit longer than I did. Because Parrish Cox, he had 5 picks in 2014, and that was the. We got rid of Terrell Brown and Carlos Rogers, just because that in that era, Trent Baalke was not a huge fan of paying secondary players, which why we were constantly rotating players out. He didn't want to pay. Yeah, he didn't want to play. He didn't want to pay Deshaun Goldson, so he left and ended up getting a big payday with Tampa Bay and didn't do anything. Never went to a Pro Bowl again after he left our team. So he was really, again, a product of the system versus a tremendous talent. And then Dante Whitner went to a Pro Bowl with us. He didn't want to get paid, so he got a better deal with Cleveland, which is where he's from. He ended up actually going to a Pro Bowl with them. So in that same season, so he was not only a combination of a better system in San Francisco, but was able to maintain that success outside of San Francisco. And I thought that was great, just because I thought he was a much better safety. Yeah, so I think it was hard to. This was a difficult, probably the most difficult list to look at, just because cornerback is a very, very difficult position. And there's only been so many good players we've had on the team. If we were to go to the 80s, I'd have a lot better choices to choose from. The 80s and 90s, that list is a little bit longer. I probably have 4 or 5 guys on that list versus here. But then again, 5 Super Bowls, you're gonna have some good players on those teams. But and 2 Super Bowl trips in the past decade, 4 NFC championships. The list was a little bit smaller just because you have 6 years of not winning very much at all. So this list was short and difficult to deal with. So to me, Sherman's a lock. And if I had to pick between Rodgers and Terrell Brown, probably have to go with Carlos Rodgers. Carlos Rodgers, his best season and most productive season was 2011. In the right system, he was obviously knew what he was doing and took advantage of that.
So is that your lock then? Are you saying Richard Sherman and Carlos Rodgers?
I think so. Yeah, Terrell Brown didn't even make a Pro Bowl in his career.
I agree. I think those were pretty much my 2 locks from the get-go. I'd say are Carlos Rodgers and Richard Sherman.
And Ahkello Witherspoon is still trying to prove himself. Emmanuel Mosley only played, he played all 16 games, but a lot of that was special teams before week 4. And then when Ahkello Witherspoon came back, he was benched, and Ahkello Witherspoon was asked to play, and then Ahkello Witherspoon lost that job to Emmanuel Mosley later in the season. So there was just a little too much uncertainty and unproven play from our latest cornerbacks outside of Richard Sherman. So it was hard to nominate them because it just was a small scope of work.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, Raymond. Moving on to our safeties. We have 4 nominees, but only 2 will make the actual team. Number 1, Dante Whitner. We just talked about him. Number 2, Deshaun Goldson. Number 3, Eric Reed. And number 4, Antone Bethea. Oh, man, he was good. All right, so Dante Whitner, let's go through the highlights here. He was with the 49ers from 2011 to 2013. He made the Pro Bowl with San Francisco. Don't forget the famous knocking out of Pierre Thomas in 2011 at the Catch 3, a game that will be spoken about a little bit later for some other players. Dante Whitner, who also was known as Dante Hittner.
It even says that on his Pro Football Reference profile.
That's amazing. Deshaun Goldson, drafted by the Niners in 2007. He played for the Niners from 2007 to 2012. Highlights 2 times Pro Bowl, first team All-Pro in 2012. Mr. Eric Reed, drafted by the 49ers in 2013. He was with the team from 2013 to 2017, and his highlights include the Pro Bowl 2013. Last one, Mr. Antone Bethea, drafted by the Indianapolis Colts in 2006, and he was played for the 49ers from 2014 to 2016. Highlights include going to the Pro Bowl for the 49ers. 3-time Pro Bowler in general. Raymond, are any of these guys a lock? I don't know if I have a lock. These guys all kind of left the Niners under tough circumstances. Bethea kind of towards the end of his career. Reed kind of begrudgingly. Whitner begrudgingly. Goldson begrudgingly. These are all guys that probably don't remember us as fondly as we remember them. This is a tricky list here.
A little bit. I mean, for me, I think Dante Whitner's a definite lock. Not only was he tremendous when he played with us, but he was pretty consistent throughout his career. He made a couple Pro Bowls, and he also does post game commentary for the Niners right now.
That's true. He does actually. You're right. I forgot about that. He commentates for the Niners. That's a great point. It completely slipped my mind. He does have a soft spot because he comments for us now. That's true. That's actually true.
He does interviews with Greg Papa. I know he does. He interviews with them on a weekly basis. So I mean, he's very much involved with the team still. And he was tremendous for us. And I'll never forget that Pierre Thomas hit.
I mean, arguably knocking out Pierre Thomas and I'm not saying I do not like seeing injuries, but I am saying that it set the tone for that game and really showed New Orleans that we were here to play, and knocking out Pierre Thomas ended up being a very major disadvantage for them offensively.
Yeah, because he was he was a run threat and a catching threat.
So how do you feel about Mr. Deshaun Goldson, Eric Reed, and Antone Bethea? Do we have any other locks at those with those 3 guys?
Man, it's hard.
If we do, then we're done. Then there's no one. There's nobody left.
Jaquiski Tart, he's been injured most of his season, and even though he had a great year with us this past year, he was down. He's been injured every year so far that he's been with us. And Jimmy Ward, same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say,
great when he's healthy, but this he played 16 games this year, but that's 15 games if you include the playoffs. He started 13 regular season games and then went through each round of the playoffs, the divisional NFC Championship and Super Bowl, and that equates to 16. But he still didn't play a full season. He's a great talent, but when he's healthy. But he's just been so inconsistent throughout his career. It was hard to nominate him. I was like, who are the guys that actually accomplished something? Antoine Bethea went to a Pro Bowl in 2014 in a losing season with Jim Harbaugh. That's pretty big.
It is. It is.
But if I had to pick, I'd probably have to go with the best tandem during the best stretch in this decade. And to me, that's Dante Whitner and Deshaun Goldson.
Man, I was kind of really leaning towards Eric Reed. I really liked Eric Reed. I thought
but he was only good that rookie season, and that was it. He's been in a steady decline ever since then.
That's true. That's true.
I just think he's more focused on activism and some of the other stuff, which is super important too. But obviously, it's to me, it seems like it's affected his ability to be effective on the field.
Well, and you talked about tandems earlier. You talked about tandems being important. And, if we have Justin Smith out there, I mean, my God, don't you want Aldon Smith right behind him? You want the Smith brothers, right? Yep. Like, if we're going to go all 49ers, all-decade team, we want the Smith brothers, right? We got to have them on the right. That's destruction. You're not stopping that tandem. So, okay. All right. Let's go with that. I like that. I like the tandem thing. Excellent. Well done. Okay. So that concludes the first half of our two-part episode of the 49ers all-decade team. So let's go through all the winners, Raymond. This is for our special teams and defense. Number 1, Andy Lee at punter. Number 2, Robbie Gould at kicker. On defensive line, we have Justin Smith, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa. I get chills just saying those names. I mean, and you know what? Nick Bosa was a shoo-in simply by the fact he made the Pepsi NFL Rookie of the Year. I mean, I'm sorry. You win Pepsi NFL Rookie of the Year, you're in. I'm sorry. You're a lock. That's a lock for me. At linebacker, Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, Aldon Smith. Shades of Harbaugh. Mr. Harbaugh. Love it. At cornerback, Richard Sherman, Carlos Rogers. And at safeties, Dante Whitner and Deshaun Goldson. That is one monster effing team. That is crazy.
Killer defense.
Killer defense.
By the way, every single player is a Pro Bowler.
Yes, as it should be.
Team. Yes, exactly.
As it should be. A lot of players, most of them coming from the Harbaugh era, but a lot of great players in the Shanny era. I think they're just young. I wouldn't be surprised if when we do the all-decade team in 10 years, if a lot of more Robert Saleh defensive players make it. But these guys have definitely earned their spots for the consistency they had at the beginning of the decade. So now let's talk about this schedule, GoldCast Nation. Next Monday, we are going to be doing our second part of the Gold Dive, part 2, where we will be talking about weeks 9 through 17 of the 49ers season. And then the following Thursday, we will be releasing part 2 of our 2010s 49ers all-decade team. And that will include the offense. So we've gone through special teams and the defense. Now we're going through the offense. Who makes the offensive line? Who makes running backs? Who makes fullbacks, tight ends, wide receivers? And then, of course, who is the quarterback of the 49ers all-decade team? That is coming up next week. So two-parters, both the two-parters coming up. The Gold Dive, weeks 9 through 17, and then our 49ers all-decade team, the offense, and then, of course, we will talk about just the entire team in its totality. But there we go. There you have it. Part 1 is in the books. Raymond, how do you feel?
I feel pretty good. I mean, if it'd be kind of interesting to know, like, who would the backups be to all these guys?
Straight up.
I mean, it'd be ridiculous to go that far, but I mean, it's fun to just get, it's like the Pro Bowl, right? The Pro Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
The Pro Bowl's got the best of the best, so this decade team has got the best of the best. Although the rotation lineup out of these guys would still be pretty monster if you take into consideration some of the players we didn't include, not only on the nominee list but also on the existing list. I mean, on the list of players that played on these teams for the last decade.
Absolutely. Really great list. Really awesome list. So, Raymond, we will be back next week. And so concludes another edition of the GoldCast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis I, baby.
Boom! We'll see you next time. Same GoldCast time, same GoldCast channel.
This is the GoldCast.